You're listening to Dissecting High Performance in Tennis, the podcast that takes you inside the minds of the world's top coaches and tennis experts, bringing you actionable insights to elevate your coaching and impact. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Dissecting High Performance in Tennis. I'm your host, Adam Blicker, and today's episode is unlike anything I've shared before. Thanks to the incredible advancements in AI, I've had the entire book, Winning Words, How to Unlock Potential Through Communication as a Tennis Coach, synthesized into a concise 26-minute summary. Yes, you heard that right. AI did this. So I was considering a lot whether to publish this at all, but I was mesmerized by the quality, by AIs chatting about the book I've just written. It's basically the condensed essence of the book into a format that's perfect for those of you who want the quick and dirty highlights rather than diving into the full-length audiobook, which runs 6 times longer. So you might end up wanting more. Then you can listen into the full audio book released on this podcast. You might want to grab a copy on Amazon for yourself. Either way, I think you'll find this episode a great primer for the ideas and strategies I've shared in Winning Words. So without further ado, let's dive into the AI-generated summary. I hope you find it as fascinating as I do.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to get into something I think a lot of coaches could benefit from. We're going to be talking about communication.
Oh, yeah.
But more specifically, we're going to be looking at communication in tennis coaching.
Okay.
And we're going to be going through this great book called Winning Words by Adam Blitcher. Have you heard of this one?
Yeah. Adam Blitcher.
Yeah.
Dissecting High Performance in Tennis podcast. Yeah, I've listened to a few episodes.
Yeah. So this book is basically like a collection of all of his best interviews over the years.
Okay.
He's interviewed over 100 different tennis coaches, sports science experts.
It's a lot of interviews.
It is. And, you know, he's got some really big names in there. So I think this is going to be a really good one for anyone who's a tennis coach.
Yeah.
Or even if you're just a player.
Right.
Or if you're interested in communication in general.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff in here for you.
It is fascinating how we always talk about, the strokes and strategy and, the mental game.
Right.
But we sometimes overlook that the most powerful tool a coach have is their words.
Yeah. It's like we're so focused on giving players all the ingredients.
Yeah.
But we're not always good at helping them.
Put them together.
Put it all together. Yeah. And, Blitzer starts off strong with this idea from Mark Tennant, who compares a great coach to a pianist.
Oh.
So what do you think he means by that?
I don't know. A pianist, they know which keys to press to create a beautiful melody. So maybe it's something like that, where a good coach knows which keys to press to unlock a player's potential.
Exactly.
Ew.
It's not just about, delivering this big motivational speech. It's about all those everyday interactions.
Yeah.
Those little moments on and off the court where our words can actually has a real impact.
The small things matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where lining off the court comes in. So Blitzer dedicates a whole section to this.
Okay.
Basically saying that a strong coach-player relationship starts long before you even step foot on a court.
Well, that makes sense. You can't build a house without a strong foundation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we lay that foundation?
Well, I think it starts with really understanding what the player's needs and values are.
Cool.
Alistair McCaw and Kyle LaCroix talk about having honest, open conversations, not just selling yourself as a coach.
Oh, so it's not about, listing off all your accomplishments and trying to impress them with your resume.
Right. Yeah, it's more about being a good listener.
Okay. So, like, how would you approach that? Like, what are some good questions to ask?
Well, McCaw and LaCroix suggest starting with questions like, why do you even want to work with me?
Okay.
And what are your expectations for this coaching relationship? Just to make sure everyone's on the same page from the beginning.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of like that analogy that Steve Johnson Sr. uses about the car needing all 4 wheels to move smoothly.
Yeah.
So both the player and the coach have to understand their roles and responsibilities
Right.
for the whole thing to work.
You need to work together.
Yeah, and Nick Saviano actually takes this even a step further.
Oh.
He describes working with players and their families as a sacred trust.
Wow. A sacred trust.
Yeah. So it's a good reminder, that we have a responsibility as coaches
Right.
to use our words and actions carefully.
Our words have a lot of power, especially with young players.
Definitely. So we've talked about setting clear expectations, building a strong foundation for the relationship.
Yeah.
But Blitzer doesn't stop there.
Okay.
He also emphasizes the importance of understanding the person behind the player.
Ooh. Okay. What's that all about?
Well, it basically means recognizing that each player is an individual.
Mhm.
They have their own personality, motivations,
Right.
Even hidden talents.
Yeah.
And coaches like Antonio Van Gritchen and Cameron Moore, they argue that to really get the best out of a player, you need to become almost like a sports psychologist.
So it's not just about the forehand and the backhand.
Right.
You have to understand the person.
Exactly.
I like that.
And Frank Giampaolo talks about how understanding things like personality dimensions, like introvert versus extrovert, sensing versus intuition,
Right.
can help you tailor your communication style to each individual player.
Yeah.
Because a one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work.
Yeah. We're all different. And especially when you're working with young athletes who are still figuring themselves out.
Right. And it's not just about individual personalities.
Right.
Blitzer also touches on coaching different genders.
Okay.
So Sarah Stone and Joe Ward, they encourage us to acknowledge that there are physiological and societal differences,
Yeah.
but without falling into gender stereotypes.
Right. It's a tough balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for example,
Uh-huh.
when coaching female players, it's important to understand how the menstrual cycle can affect their training and performance.
Ah, that makes sense.
It's not about treating them differently,
Right.
but it's about being informed and sensitive
Yeah.
to their individual needs.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, there are going to be some topics that
Yeah.
are trickier to navigate than others.
Right.
Things like food choices, body image, even mental health.
Definitely delicate subjects.
Yeah, but they're important.
Hmm.
And Sarah Stone suggests that we start by asking questions
Oh, okay.
and inviting open discussion, but always being mindful of timing and boundaries.
Yeah, you don't want to pry.
Right. But you also want to create a safe space for players to share their concerns and feel heard.
Exactly.
And all of this groundwork we've talked about, the clear expectations, understanding the individual, navigating sensitive conversations, it all leads to one crucial thing:
That's that.
trust.
Trust. Yeah, of course. You can't have a good relationship without trust.
Exactly. Because without trust, communication breaks down.
Yeah, for sure.
And Alistair McCaw says it perfectly. He says you have to connect before you direct.
I like that. Connect before you direct. So it's not just about sharing your tennis knowledge. It's about that human connection.
Exactly.
That's a good foundation for any relationship.
Yeah. So how do we build that connection? How do we foster that trust?
Well, one way is through empathy. Alberto Castellani defines empathy as seeing the world through the player's lens, putting yourself in their shoes, understanding their perspective, their struggles, their aspirations.
So not just seeing them as a tennis player.
Right. Seeing them as a person.
Yeah. And David Meister has this trustworthiness equation that he uses.
A whole equation for trust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might sound a little complicated,
Yeah.
but it basically breaks it down into 4 key elements: credibility, reliability, intimacy, and self-orientation.
Okay, let's break that down.
Okay. So credibility,
Yeah.
that comes from demonstrating your expertise.
Right. So you have to know what you're talking about. Like, for example, if a player's struggling with their serve, sharing your own experiences overcoming similar challenges can really build credibility.
So it's not just about telling them what to do.
Right.
It's about showing them that you've been there, you understand.
I get it.
Yeah. And then reliability.
Yeah.
That's all about being consistent, dependable.
So if you say you're going to do something, you do it.
Yeah. If you make a promise, you keep it.
Those small things can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Build that trust over time.
Intimacy might sound a little strange.
Yeah, in a coaching relationship.
In this context.
Yeah.
But it really means creating a safe space for the player to be open,
Oh, okay.
to be vulnerable, to share their thoughts and feelings without judgment.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. And then finally, self-orientation.
Okay.
That's all about putting the player's needs above your own.
Mm-hmm.
So making decisions that are going to benefit them, even if it means sacrificing your own ego or agenda.
That's a tough one.
It can be. But it's really important.
Right.
And trust isn't just a one-time achievement. It's an ongoing process.
You have to nurture it.
Yeah. It's like a garden.
Yeah.
You have to keep watering it, weeding it, making sure it has the right conditions to thrive.
Like a plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike Barrell has this great analogy where he compares trying to fill a player with knowledge to trying to fill a bottle.
Oh.
So you can only fill the bottle if the lid is open.
Okay.
Right? And that lid represents the player's receptiveness.
So they have to be open to learning.
Exactly. And that openness comes from trust.
Yeah.
It's about creating an environment where they feel safe and supported enough to actually absorb what you're teaching them.
That makes sense. So we've talked about setting expectations, building trust, but now it's time to actually step onto the court.
Yeah.
And see how these communication principles translate into action.
I'm ready for that.
Blitcher calls this section Accelerate, all about maximizing learning and development during practice. We'll talk about giving good feedback, how to avoid overcoaching, and using our words to empower players to take ownership of their game.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay, so we've laid all this groundwork off the court, but now let's talk about what happens when we actually get on the court for practice.
Yeah, how do we make sure all those hours of hitting actually translate into improvement?
Well, Dave Bandelin has a great quote about this. He says that experience alone doesn't guarantee improvement.
So just hitting balls for hours on end isn't enough.
Right. It's not just about putting in the time. It's about how we use that time. And Blitcher emphasizes the importance of evaluating those practice sessions, and he actually breaks it down into these steps for evaluating individual drills.
Okay, so instead of just going through a routine of drills without really thinking about it, we need to be more intentional.
Exactly. And the first step is defining the purpose of each drill.
Okay, so why are we doing this drill? What are we trying to achieve?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you want to provide targeted feedback during the drill that aligns with that purpose.
So if the drill is about improving footwork, then the feedback should focus on footwork.
Right. Not on something like grip or follow through. And then after the drill, you want to honestly assess how effective it actually was.
I like that. I've definitely been guilty of just doing drills without really analyzing whether they were actually helpful or not. So how do we ask better questions to evaluate those drills?
Well, Blitcher admits that he used to ask these vague questions like, how was that? Or, was it fun?
Yeah, I've definitely done that too.
But the responses were often pretty surface level and not particularly insightful.
Yeah, you don't really learn much from that.
Right. So he shifted his approach to asking more targeted questions that encouraged deeper reflection.
Oh, okay. Do you have some examples of what those questions might look like?
Yeah, so let's say the purpose of a drill is to improve the speed of a player's recovery step after their serve.
Okay.
Instead of just asking, how was that? You might ask, how fast was your recovery step today on a scale of 1 to 10?
Okay.
Or what felt challenging about making a quick recovery step?
Those questions really force the player to think critically about their performance.
And Simon Wheatley even suggests letting the player offer their feedback first.
Oh, interesting.
So you might ask, what did you notice about the speed of your recovery step today?
Okay.
And then offer your own observations.
So it's more of a two-way conversation.
Right. It empowers the player to be an active participant in their development rather than just passively receiving feedback.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a much more collaborative approach.
But Emilio Sanchez-Icario reminds us that there needs to be a balance. Sometimes players need that gentle nudge to encourage self-reflection, but other times they need a firmer voice to push them out of their comfort zone.
It's that delicate dance between empathy and authority that all great coaches have to master.
Right. And speaking of being a great coach, maintaining honesty and integrity is paramount. Blitcher talks to a lot of coaches about this, like Mark Sofolis, Dirk Hordorf, Robert Davis, Sven Groneveld.
Okay, and what's the common thread among all these coaches?
They all emphasize the importance of telling players what they need to hear, even if it's difficult. Even if it means risking your job.
Wow, that's putting the player's best interests above everything else.
And Christian Groh highlights the long-term benefit of upholding your integrity. He says that players might not appreciate the tough love in the moment.
Yeah, it can be hard to hear.
But ultimately, they respect your honesty and dedication to their growth.
And I imagine it strengthens that coach-player bond in the long run.
Absolutely. Magnus Norman talks about how players often come back years later and thank him for his honesty, even if it was hard to hear at the time.
It shows that you truly care about them.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered setting expectations, building trust, maximizing learning during practice.
Now let's talk about tournament time. The high-stakes moments where communication becomes even more crucial.
Blitcher calls this section Amplify. And it's all about setting the stage for success before, during, and after a match. And it starts with the pre-match warm-up.
So more than just hitting a few balls to get loose.
Right. It's a chance to prepare both physically and mentally for the battle ahead.
What are some key things coaches should keep in mind during this time?
Well, first and foremost, it's crucial to respect each player's individual needs and routines.
Okay, so some players might need an hour to warm up, while others only need 20 minutes.
Exactly. It's not about imposing a rigid structure, but about adapting to each player's preferences.
So how do we create that optimal warm-up environment?
Well, you want to focus on reinforcing the player's strengths and emphasizing what already works well.
Okay, so it's not the time to try to fix technical issues or introduce new concepts.
Right. It's about building positive momentum heading into the match.
It's like giving them a pep talk through your actions, reminding them of what they're capable of.
Exactly. And then comes the pre-match planning session. Dave Bandelin has a great quote about this. He says, if you want to evaluate something after a match, you need a match plan before you walk onto the court.
So it's about having a clear roadmap for success.
Exactly. And Frank Giampaolo distinguishes between productive and counterproductive focal points.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
Well, he encourages coaches to emphasize performance goals over outcome goals.
So what's the difference?
An outcome goal might be something like, you need to win this match to move up in the rankings.
Okay.
Which puts a lot of pressure on the player and focuses on factors outside of their control.
Yeah, because you can't always control whether you win or lose.
Right. A performance goal, on the other hand, might be something like, let's focus on attacking your opponent's weaker backhand and stepping in aggressively on their second serve.
So it's about shifting the focus from the result to the process.
Exactly. And Wim Fissette, who has coached champions like Naomi Osaka, Victoria Azarenka, Angelique Kerber.
Wow, he's coached some big names.
He emphasizes the importance of customizing your pre-match communication to each player's personality.
So what works for one player might not work for another.
Exactly. Some players thrive on detailed information and analysis, while others need a more simplified and intuitive approach. Michael Joyce, for instance, talks about how his communication style with Maria Sharapova was very different from his approach with Jessica Pegula.
It just goes to show that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to coaching.
Exactly. It's about understanding your player and adapting your communication style accordingly.
Okay, so the pre-match talk is done, the warm-up is complete, the player is about to step onto the court. What's our role as coaches during the match itself?
Well, this is where the rules around on-court coaching come into play, and those rules can vary significantly depending on the tournament.
Yeah, some tournaments allow it, some don't.
Exactly. But regardless of whether verbal coaching is allowed or not, our primary focus remains the same to provide support and guidance.
So even when we can't speak, our presence can still make a difference.
Absolutely. Our body language speaks volumes. A well-timed nod of encouragement or a subtle gesture reinforcing a pre-match tactic can be incredibly impactful.
It's about letting the player know that they're not alone out there.
Right. And when verbal coaching is allowed, we need to be mindful of what Blitzer calls the 3 buckets of support.
Okay, what are those 3 buckets?
Encouragement, reinforcement, and adjustment.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the moment.
Exactly. Encouragement provides a psychological boost. Reinforcement reminds the player of their pre-match focal points. And adjustment offers a quick tip when they need a course correction.
I imagine keeping those adjustments concise is crucial, especially during a match when time is limited.
Right. Think of it like sending a text message. You want to get your point across quickly and clearly. Instead of saying your toss is too low, you might simply say more height on the serve.
It's about delivering actionable guidance in a way that's easy to understand and implement under pressure.
Dario Novak has done a lot of research on on-court coaching, and he emphasizes the importance of nonverbal communication as well.
So things like eye contact, body language.
Exactly. Making eye contact, removing your sunglasses, using physical gestures like a high five or a pat on the shoulder can convey respect, interest, and support.
It's those small gestures that reinforce the connection and create a sense of trust.
And Blitzer suggests a 4-step process for making those moments of verbal coaching really count.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, initiate contact with a gentle gesture. Then actively listen to understand the player's perspective. Deliver your main message concisely and clearly. And finally, take a moment to clarify any confusion and make sure everyone's on the same page.
It's a structured approach that ensures you're making the most of that limited time.
Now, as the match concludes, we shift into what Blitzer calls the post-match story.
Okay, so this is where we turn the experience win or lose into a valuable learning opportunity.
Exactly. And Brad Gilbert actually learned a valuable lesson about this from his own coach, Tom Chivington.
Okay, what was the lesson?
Well, Chivington always maintained a consistent demeanor, regardless of whether Brad won or lost. He didn't get overly excited after a big win, nor did he sulk after a tough loss.
That must have created a very stable and supportive environment for Brad.
Exactly. It allowed him to focus on continuous improvement without feeling the pressure of his coach's emotional roller coaster. And remember, post-match analysis shouldn't be limited to losses. Evaluating what went well after a win is just as important as identifying areas for improvement after a loss.
Oh, that's a good point. It's easy to just celebrate a win and move on, but understanding what contributed to that success is crucial for replicating it.
Exactly. And Michael Joyce actually shares a story about learning this the hard way.
Oh, what happened?
He was coaching Jessica Pegula, and she almost let a big lead slip away, but ultimately won the match.
Okay.
And his initial instinct was to criticize her for almost blowing it.
Yeah, it's easy to focus on the negative, especially when emotions are running high.
Right.
What?
But his uncle gave him some wise advice. He told him to let Jessica cool down emotionally before diving into analysis.
Sometimes you just need to give players space to process their own experience.
Exactly. And Frank Giampaolo and Alistair McCaw suggest aligning the timing of the post-match talk with the player's next match.
Okay, so if there's another match later that day.
A brief conversation focusing on immediate positives and adjustments might be enough.
But if there's more time before the next match,
Then it's often beneficial to have a more in-depth conversation when everyone has had a chance to calm down.
makes sense.
And Kyle LaCroix takes it a step further and emphasizes letting the player initiate the conversation.
Oh, interesting.
It empowers them to take ownership of their performance and encourages open and honest communication.
So it's not just the coach dictating what needs to be discussed.
Right. It's a more collaborative approach that recognizes that true growth comes from within.
I like that. So how do we make sure those post-match conversations are truly productive? How do we turn those match experiences into valuable learning opportunities?
Well, Kyle LaCroix reminds us that the outcome itself is often inconsequential.
What does he mean by that?
You can play poorly and win, and you can play well and lose.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the performance that truly matters.
So it's about separating the result from the process.
Exactly. And Dave Miley encourages coaches to focus on performance-based questions. Instead of asking, did you win, ask, how did it go? Or, if you could play the match again, what would you do differently?
Those are much better questions. They encourage deeper reflection and self-analysis.
And Liam Smith emphasizes the importance of broadening the player's perspective, especially after a loss.
Okay.
He encourages coaches to help players find positives even in defeat.
So it's about shifting from, I lost, to here's what I learned and here's what I can do better next time.
Exactly. It's about finding those glimmers of hope, those areas of improvement that can fuel future growth.
Yeah.
But after a match, it's easy to overwhelm a player with information.
Yeah, where do we even begin? How do we avoid information overload?
Well, Alistair McCaw has some good advice for that. He suggests focusing on the one or two key things that will make the biggest difference.
Okay, so don't try to fix everything at once.
Right. Prioritize those high-impact areas and create a clear action plan.
So it's about quality over quantity when it comes to feedback.
Exactly. And those key areas often tie back to those pre-match focal points we talked about earlier.
Right, so it creates that consistency and helps the player see the connections between practice, preparation, and performance.
Exactly. But sometimes those patterns persist, you know? Players keep falling into the same traps, making the same mistakes.
Yeah, it can be frustrating for everyone involved when those persistent patterns just keep holding them back.
It is. And that's where Chris Argyris' concept of feedback loops comes in handy.
Okay, feedback loops. I'm intrigued.
So he describes 3 levels of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Single loop learning is about identifying and correcting errors.
Okay.
It's asking, am I doing this right?
Okay, so just fixing the mistake.
Right. Then there's double loop learning, which
Yeah.
involves exploring alternative solutions.
So asking what other options are available.
Exactly. But triple loop learning, that's where the real magic happens.
Okay, triple loop learning. Let's get into it.
So triple loop learning goes beyond just fixing errors or finding new solutions. It's about understanding the WHY behind those recurring patterns.
So we're digging deeper.
Exactly. It's asking, why am I making these choices? What beliefs or assumptions are driving my actions?
So it's getting to the root of the problem, not just addressing the symptoms.
Precisely. And Blitzer gives this great example of a player who consistently becomes more defensive when they're leading in a match.
Oh yeah, I've seen that happen before.
So through triple loop learning, the coach helps the player realize that their fear of losing is actually causing them to play not to lose rather than playing to win.
Oh, that's a subtle but important distinction.
Right? And once those limiting beliefs are brought to light, the player can start to challenge them and develop new, more empowering habits.
Okay, so we've dug deep. We've uncovered those underlying issues. Now what?
Well, even after delving into those deeper layers, it's still important to keep things simple and actionable.
Right, we don't want to overwhelm them.
Exactly. Focus on the 1 or 2 key takeaways from the match. Give them something specific to work on.
A clear path forward.
And always acknowledge their effort and attitude, regardless of the outcome.
That's so important.
Did they give their best effort? Did they maintain a positive attitude even when things got tough?
Yeah, those are the things that really matter in the long run.
Exactly. Reinforcing those qualities is crucial for building resilience and fostering a growth mindset.
It's about focusing on the things they can control, even when faced with challenges and setbacks.
Okay, so we've covered the on-site post-match analysis, but Blitzer actually dedicates a whole section to the car ride home.
The car ride home. I never really thought of that as an extension of the coaching process.
Well, Frank Giampaolo makes a really interesting point about this. He says that for a lot of young players, that car ride home can feel like an interrogation.
Oh, yeah, I could see that happening.
You know, the parents, often with the best intentions, start peppering them with questions about why they lost what they could have done better, whether they're truly committed to the sport.
It's like adding salt to the wound.
Right. The player is already feeling disappointed, maybe even embarrassed, and now they have to relive the whole match under a microscope.
Oof. Yeah, that's not a good feeling.
And Peter Smith shares this great anecdote about how he handled a similar situation.
I'm curious to hear this.
So one of his players had just lost a tough match and was probably expecting a lecture on the ride home.
Yeah, understandable.
But instead of diving into analysis, Peter simply asked, "Where do you want to go to eat?"
Wow, what a simple but brilliant move.
Right. It completely disarmed the player and created a more relaxed and supportive environment.
I bet that made a huge difference.
It did, and it opened the door for a more productive conversation later on.
So sometimes it's about knowing when to step back and just be present.
Exactly. And Kyle LaCroix has this amazing question that he suggests using to close out those post-match exchanges.
What was the question?
He asks, "What are you looking forward to the most right now?"
That's interesting. It seems like such a simple question, but I bet it reveals a lot about the player's state of mind.
It does. Their answer reveals whether they're focused on things within their control or dwelling on things they can't control. Are they stuck in a negative narrative, or are they embracing a growth mindset?
It's like a window into their inner world.
Exactly. And by understanding their story, we can help them reshape it. We can help them shift from a narrative of defeat to a narrative of learning and growth.
And that shift in perspective can have a huge impact on their future performance.
Absolutely. It's about helping them see the bigger picture and find meaning in their experiences, both positive and negative.
And that's really the essence of effective communication, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about giving instructions or delivering feedback. It's about building relationships, fostering trust, and empowering players to reach their full potential.
That's it in a nutshell. And Blitzer's book, Winning Words, offers a wealth of insights and practical strategies for achieving just that.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about the power of communication in tennis coaching.
Me too. And I think the key takeaway is that words matter. They have the power to unlock potential, to build confidence, to shape a player's entire journey.
Absolutely. So to all the coaches out there listening, I encourage you to think about how you can use these communication strategies to make a positive impact on your players.
And remember, it's not just about what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. Choose your words wisely.
Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.
If you made it this far, thank you for listening. I hope the AI summary gave you a valuable glimpse into Winning Words and perhaps even inspired you to explore the full book. Here's how you can support the mission of elevating tennis coaching. First of all, you can ping me on Twitter. I'd love to hear your thoughts or any key takeaways you had from this episode. Consider gifting the book if you know a fellow coach or colleague who could benefit from better communication strategies. Why not share Winning Words with them? Third, you can spread the word. If this episode resonated with you, share the podcast link with someone who might find it useful. Together we can help more coaches unlock the full potential of the players they work with. thank you for being part of this journey. And as always, keep striving for excellence. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Dissecting High Performance in Tennis. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and visit adamblicker.com for more coaching insights and resources. And hey, if you're looking to sharpen your coaching skills even further, grab a copy of Winning Words on Amazon. The ebook costs the same as a candy bar, so why not skip the sugar and invest in becoming a healthier, wiser coach instead? Order your copy today and unlock the distilled wisdom from the brilliant guests featured right here on the podcast. Together, let's minimize frustration and maximize impact.